Hello and welcome to a series of videos I am preparing for the Monero community, where I will be presenting some tools and techniques and share my experience from life in translation in general and localization in particular. All the links I mention will be listed in the comments below, so you won't need to take any notes. So these videos will focus on a program called OmegaT, which belongs to a class of programs called cat tools. And in order to find out what that means, let's go to the OmegaT web page, to the home page. So the first thing we see here is that it says free translation memory tool. So what does that mean? Well, the idea of a translation memory is that the system remembers how you translated some word or a phrase, so that the next time you come across something similar, it can make suggestions on how to translate. And over time, as the memory grows larger and larger, it will make you more efficient and also more consistent in your use of terminology. So let's scroll down the page, and we can see here a bunch of features listed, and they suggest that there are many more benefits to using a cat tool, but I will go through these features in separate videos, and I will make use cases from the Monero project and sort of show how all of these features are how powerful they can be once you get used to them. Okay, so a little bit further down here is a preview of what the program looks like when you run it. Here is the entry to the download section. We will get back to that in just a few seconds. Here is sort of the story of, part of the story of the OmegaT project. And the program is written in Java in such a way that it's available on pretty much any platform. It's free, it's open source, and it's built by a community of volunteers. So it does in fact have a few things in common with Monero, even though obviously it serves a very different purpose. So anyway, this is why I find it so exciting to present OmegaT as a tool for the Monero community. But this video will only talk about or explain the installation and the basic configuration. So let's return to the download section and get started. So let's go for the download overview so that we can see everything which is available. So the first thing we see is that there is a standard version and a latest version. Some programs would call this the stable version and the latest version. But ever since I got into using OmegaT 5 or 6 years ago, I have always used the latest version, and I've kept updating to the latest whenever there is a new release. So I recommend you do the same. I will be making these videos using 4.1.3, so if you're using an older version, maybe something might not work, or I don't know. What I will show has only been tested on the latest version. So let's have a look at all these different platforms. There's a column of platforms, and there's a whole list there. So since, as I mentioned, OmegaT is written in Java, it requires the Java runtime environment to run. And in my case, I have downloaded the JRE, the Java runtime, separately, and I maintain it up to date as a separate installation on my computer. So in my case, I would download Windows version without the JRE. But if you don't have it, or if you are unsure of whether you have it or not, you can just as well choose with either the 64-bit or the 32-bit JRE. It's hard to go wrong here, really. I mean, there's some information about OS X things here. I don't use that personally, so I don't know what it is. And as you can see, like Linux and cross-platform. I will show you in a moment something about Linux as well, so we can get back to that later. So in our case now, let's go for the Windows without JRE. And as you can see, it takes us to SourceForge, and if you're new to software development and open source, you may not recognize SourceForge, but it is a very large open source repository and platform. So you could somehow almost say that it's sort of the old version of GitHub. Today everybody knows about GitHub and we all love it and use it. SourceForge still exists, and so this says something about how old the OmegaT project is, that it sort of actually got started before the existence of GitHub. Never mind that. As you can see, it asks us to download the file. I won't go through this whole process now. I will just show how I went. Well, you download the file, you double click it, and what will be displayed then when you run the installation, there is a dialog that asks you to select the language you want to use as sort of the localized version. And obviously I have selected English so that you can understand the menus and everything when in the further videos I make, so that you can follow along. And once you have installed it, it's available in the start menu, and you can click there to start it. And this is what it looks like when it appears on screen. So we could make it a little bit smaller. So here is the program, and now, as you can see, it's all in English because I chose English when I installed it. And directly here in this editor pane, I will go through what these different panes are, and actually there are even more panes down here. As you can see, there are direct instructions on how to get started, how to set up a project, how to translate the file, how to do some quality control, how to create the translated file, and so on. So I will go into much detail about these things in further videos, but now it's all about getting set up and installed. So let's see. Yes, now we need a second thing. We need to install one thing more before being fully able to make use of OmegaT. OmegaT's file support is based on a plugin architecture, and when you install it, doesn't really say now in the user interface, but when you install it, there is built-in support for a large number of files. So it is useful out of the box for translating things like maybe flyers and web pages. But as Monero localizers, we are interested in the .ts file format, which is used by the daemon and the GUI projects. And OmegaT doesn't have built-in support for that, but since as I mentioned, it's built on a plugin architecture, and there is a plugin available that gives us support for .ts files, and that plugin is called the Okapi Filters plugin for OmegaT. And let's scroll down the list here, and we can see those filters that are included in this plugin. And here we have the TS filters, the TS files. So they are part of the Qt toolkit, cross-platform programming toolkit. And lo and behold, there is even some support for markdown files. I have to admit I haven't tried that filter very much yet, so I can't really speak for it, but I know that markdown could possibly be useful in the GUI, in the Monero website, in the Get Monero website. Okay, so how do you install that? Well, you just go to this download and installation section and read the instruction, follow the instructions. You can see as well, since it's just a jar file basically, and so you do some different things whether you're on a Windows or Mac or Linux machine. And basically what you do, you download a zip file, I think, and then you need to copy that zip file into the installation program of OmegaT. So as you can see, it's installed in the program files folder on my machine, OmegaT/plugins here, and that's the jar file. And now we have added support for TS files. And actually, I won't talk much about it now, but I have, in preparation for the next video, I will make, set up some simple demo projects that I have in my MRU list. And as you can see, here we have the monero.ts, which contains all the localizable strings of the Monero daemon. And here in this column it says that it uses the QTTS files plugin, or filter rather, from OmegaT. Now, if you haven't seen what the TS files look like, or whether you have or not, I will show you. So this monero.ts file looks like this. So basically, when you translate or when you localize Monero, you look at this sentence here and you add a translation between these, in this element between these XML tags. Of course, you have to make a copy of the original file first, a copy for your target language, but then you have to go through and enter your translation here. And as you can see, there's a lot of irrelevant information that you have to sort of look past. Compare this to what it looks like in OmegaT. So let's scroll back to the beginning. Can you see this this sentence here, invalid destination address, appears here. That's the same thing because we have the same file open, once in Notepad++ and once in OmegaT. So here I have space to write, to type my translation. So as you can see, this is I have already done most of that already, so I won't go into much detail, but can you see the difference in editing a file like this versus editing a file like this? And here are hits from the translation memory. So I can say, okay, payment ID, what other sentences containing payment ID have I already translated and how did I translate them? So I can sort of keep consistency. But that's the story for another day. We're getting close to finishing now, but let me just quickly mention this cross-platform feature of OmegaT. I have a second, this is my Windows powerful machine, which I do most of my work on. I also have, sorry, wrong picture. I also have an old burner laptop that I have inherited because it was too slow or difficult to use for its previous owner. It has a 10-inch screen. Obviously, I'm running the screen recorder on my Windows machine, so I can't show you. I had to take a picture of my burner laptop. Let's see if we can go to the next picture. But as you can see, I'm running OmegaT on that machine as well. It's harder to see, but I'm just telling you that I'm running Manjaro Linux, which is basically Arch Linux with a graphical user interface. Very nice. And I can't show you its screen sort of live, but what I do have is a terminal window open to that machine that you saw in the photograph. And we could do maybe Neo. We could run the NeoFetch program here that I have installed, and it shows you, well, the architecture. You can pause the video and look at that. It's a very old and pretty slow 32-bit machine, but thanks to the powers of Linux and Linus Torvalds, I can still run it and use it quite effectively. And as you saw, I have OmegaT installed on it. So how do you install it? I mean, you saw that on the OmegaT homepage, you could download Linux versions. But instead, in my case, I went to the Arch Linux user repository, and there you can find it available as well. So on a side note, I just pulled up the search for Monero on the Arch Linux user repository. So here you have different Monero versions and related things. That's just as a side note. So I won't show you how to install OmegaT now because it takes quite a long time, but as you can see, I mentioned you need the OmegaT plugin, and we could do that one just as a quick demo. So what I will do now, what I will show you now, is how to install the OmegaT plugin Okapi from the AUR using the command line that I have here. So this is the command line for my burner laptop. And what we need is this URL. So I select it like that, copy the link, and as you can see, it ends in Git. So this is in fact the URL for a Git repository. And here, let's just list that. You can see how I have various installations of Monero that I've taken from the AUR. So now we want to clone this Okapi plugin. Yeah, here you can see that I have actually OmegaT installed, but that takes a long time, so I won't show that. Instead, I will show you how to, we need to do, of course, git clone and then this URL, and that will create a new directory called, well, this one here. We go down into that like that. It contains one single file. We have a look at that, and this file contains downloading and installation instructions for the plugins. We won't look at those anymore. You can look at those and see, is there anything you would need to be suspicious about, for example, but we don't do that now. Instead, we call a program called make package -si and run that, and that program will read through this pkg build file, extract this information, download everything it needs. So in this case, I will just type the password here. So that now it uses the Pacman package manager of Arch Linux to install, and we select yes, and here we go, and now the plugin is installed. Right, so I think I'll leave this for now, and just say something like hasta la vista, baby. See if I can shut down this recording.